Okay, so Daredevil, episode 5. Let's go. Claire is wounded, battered, and bruised. This is intended as a reminder that the events of last episode won't just be breezed over. Like Karen's neck bruising, Claire's injuries will linger. That situation will linger. We then see Matt making her breakfast. Some playful flirting, Claire commenting about Matt hopefully being a billionaire playboy, a tongue-in-cheek reference to other billionaire playboys that do this vigilante stuff. Batman comes to mind, or Oliver Queen if you can't afford a Batman toy. He tells her, unfortunately, he has a job that he must go to soon. He's a lawyer. She asks how that works, and he says he'll let her know when he figures it out. This almost sounds like an admission that he's in an intense situation. And digging a little deeper, his lack of planning is the cause of Claire's current state. He hadn't intended for her to be a target for repercussions, and he actively tried to save her, but the Russians were very much insistent on finding her, as the Man in Black has been a pain in the bliat for them for too long. I mean, even though Claire's a bit bashed, Matt at least tried to plan it out. I guess more so than Disney did with Star Wars. And look how that turned out. Claire's in better shape than that franchise as well. Moving on, he's able to tell when she opens a cut on her back by tasting copper in the air, copper being a component found in blood. The fact he can taste it in the air means there's fresh blood, i.e. a fresh wound. She's dumbfounded. This is yet another glimpse into Matt's powers. It's more than just super hearing, as the 2003 movie seemed to rely quite strongly on. And this is the first time I've seen his powers demonstrated so well. In this scene, and Cutman, when he says Simeon, the guy who would come to taste the inside of the dumpster, smells like cigarettes and cheap deodorant. He also asks for consent before removing Claire's shirt, the gentleman. What Matt hears is then played for us, the non-blind audience, presumably. Very bony, creaking and squelching. A very visceral noise, but Matt doesn't seem fazed, considering how many bones he's broken himself as the vigilante, and his history of patching up his dad. Swelling's down, a hairline fracture. He can hear her bones shift when she breathes. Charming, clearly a fan of bones, haha. Following on, he states there's more than 5 senses for him. Small changes in air density, minor movements in the world, all form an image for him to look at. And to him, it looks like a world on fire. This is literal and metaphorical. I mean, it literally looks like everything is on fire to him. But he also views his world as being aflame with darkness and suffering. He wants to put it out. Fight fire with fire, to quote your Lord and Savior Ghost Rider. Matt points out that the Russians know who she is, and Matt offers Claire to stay with him. He's very obviously charming, and she's quite obviously charmed. They kiss, can't say I'm too shocked. But also this is further development for the bond they share, which was heightened after the events of last episode. They trust each other now, and also care for each other more. This scene is it's beautifully crafted. It's slower to ease the come down from the intensity of what we last saw, allowing the writer's dialogue to continue fleshing out Matt and Claire's relationship. It's also a smart in-universe way to further show the extent of Matt's abilities. Him patching Claire up himself is also in character, as 1, he cares about her, 2, this is kind of his fault, and 3, we know he can patch up wounds like this as he did so for ages with his father after fights. All of it remains in character and in-universe, yet it still allows progression of Matt's abilities for the audience and shows us his philosophy. The world, his city, is burning. It's almost like a depiction of hell, everything in flames or something visually resembling fire. Poetic. Matt, the devil of Hell's Kitchen, is in hell. One scene that lasts less than 5 minutes, I think, and yet so much is happening. So much care in one small segment. I know I harp about it all the time, but it's unbelievable how much care went into it. The writing, the characters, the motivations. It makes it so much more than just your average superhero show. We have some more dialogue. Claire asks how Matt knows Fisk is the head of this criminal enterprise, and he brings up the bowling alley incident, where Prohaska was killed by Healy. Prohaska owned the majority of kitchen cabs. Not kitchen cabinets, as I thought that meant, but the majority in cabs. Taxi cabs in Hell's Kitchen. Cabs in Hell's Kitchen equals kitchen cabs. Prohaska's death meant the ownership of those cabs in the previous episode now transfers to the Russians. The deal was definitely soured, and Healy was hired to remove Prohaska, permanently. Matt seems to believe Fisk hired Healy. Claire mentions that the Russians beating on her stopped when she heard a name, evidently one of significance. Vladimir. Cut to Vladimir, a bit stressed out over the status of his brother who hasn't shown up for work. Wesley shows up and is also curious. Wesley obviously knows where he is, but he won't say to avoid the potential awkwardness. Yeah, I know where your brother is. I was one of the last people to see him intact. What did you say? Nothing. The man from the previous episode with the baseball bat, who I'll call Clawface from now on, comes in and says they found him, at which point we're shown Anatoly's decapitated corpse. Vladimir is emotional and admits to his dead brother that they should have stayed in Russia, as they discussed in the Gulag. Despite their differences and their clashes in prior episodes, they were brothers. Vladimir loved Anatoly, and this is a devastating blow to him. He then finds a mask in Anatoly's jacket. Given his emotional state, Vlad's grief immediately turns to rage, as he has been shown to be full of when compared to his late brother. Without Anatoly's caution to temper his fury, Vladimir orders the Russians to bring him the Man in Black's head. We then see the remnants of Anatoly's head being cleaned from the car door, in front of Leland, Madame Gao, and Nobu. Wesley shows up with Fisk in person. He apologizes for being absent. He says the Russians are no longer part of the operation because Fisk killed Anatoly. They're all a bit upset, obviously, and reasonably. Fisk says that the surgical removal of Anatoly's cranium via car door was a personal matter. Leland pointing out that Vladimir isn't a feelsy guy, except for anger. I actually kind of like Leland. He's snarky and seems to recognize the absurdity of the situation. Fisk says the profits from the Russians will go to all of them, 4 shares instead of 5, and they all obviously agree to the conditions. Leland points out that because of the heightening danger, he's getting his stun gun out of storage. A small line, maybe a throwaway, but actually will be paid off in a future episode. In their interactions, Fisk clearly has respect for Madame Gao. She's quite mysterious, as is Nobu, who leaves with an ominous warning to Fisk about the people he answers to. We cut to a blind kid in a taxi being driven by 2 Russian guys. It's not actually forcefully made clear if the kid is blind, but from his tinted glasses, similar to Matt's, is made more evident. Plus the fact that they mention he's one of Gao's runners, who have been shown to be blind in episode 1, in a scene that I never actually discussed, to my everlasting shame. They're asking about the Man in Black, but the kid doesn't respond. Keep in mind, all of this bit is done in 1 take, just to keep that in mind. The camera rotates around in the taxi to show the guys enter the building, before panning around to show that the Man in Black is waiting outside. Dramatic, sure, but could also just be Matt sensing inside the building to figure out how many enemies he has to face. Still 1 take, it hasn't cut yet. The guys exit the building and are quickly dispatched effectively by Matt. Some guys come out and shoot at the Man in Black, and end up shooting the blind guy in the taxi in the back of the head. They investigate. Matt was hiding under the car, and then he gets out to engage the armed thugs. He throws the clip of the handgun at the guy from across the taxi, showing he has spatial awareness and expert precision, as established in the previous episodes. He starts to question the last guy, but the guy pleads with the Man in Black to not cut off his head, to which the Man in Black is confused. The guy then says everyone knows he cut off Anatoly's head. I'll admit this dialogue is a little clunky and really only serves to tell Matt the Russians believe he was the one who took Anatoly's life, but a high-profile death in such a brutal manner would make everyone at least slightly fearful of the man who did it, presumably. He starts to ask for more details, but the police arrive and take the man away. We're then shown Karen, who is having frustrations with the machines she got from the auction. They're old and maybe don't work as well as they should. A woman then comes in, Mrs. Cardenas. She says that Brett Mahoney's mother referred her, something about cigars, as shown in episode 1 when Foggy braves Mahoney with cigars for his mother. Again, everything has setup and payoff. The owner of the building Cardenas lives in wants them all to leave. Cardenas describes their living conditions. Police couldn't help, as it is a city issue. This clearly irritates Matt. He speaks Spanish, evidently an intelligent man, as is Foggy. Matt wants Foggy to talk to Tully's lawyer, the guy who owns the building. He is represented by the company that Matt and Foggy used to intern for. He's reluctant. He describes them as sharks, and then himself as delicious. So Matt suggests he take Karen with him for help. Matt goes to see Mahoney at the precinct, and says that a friend of his mother's, Mrs. Cardenas, came to them about the case involving Tully. Matt requests he see some files about previous complaints people have had against Tully to try and start building the case against him. Because Mahoney's mother referred the case, Mahoney's kind of personally involved now, and leaves to find the files for Murdoch. While Mahoney is away, Matt tries to listen to the station for anything interesting, possibly about a Russian from presumably the night before. So this was a double-edged mission for Matt. He came here to help Mrs. Cardenas, but also to find out if there is a Russian man in, as he saw one being taken by the cops. Sure enough, he's right. There is one being interrogated by the 2 cops seen in episode 1, Blake and Hoffman. The Russian gives up the name of Wilson Fisk, and the 2 cops look a bit stunned. They undo his handcuffs, and their following words about whose turn it is confuses Matt. After which one of the cops punches the other one voluntarily, and then they start shouting that he's reaching for his gun, and so they fire on the Russian and kill him. Clearly the punch and the loud speech was intended to signal to people outside that the Russian hit that guy and went for his gun, and they had to kill him in self-defense. This reiterates how feared Fisk is, and how important it is to his empire that his name doesn't get out. This particular guy wasn't strong enough to keep Fisk's name out of his mouth. Therefore, he needed to die. This also signals to Matt that these cops are paid off by Fisk to keep things like this under control, as he heard everything. Intense stuff. To ease the intensity off a little bit, we're back with Karen and Foggy Bear. Foggy. Their appointment happens to be with Foggy's ex, Marcy. She says the workmen feared for their safety as the building Miss Cardenas lives in is full of criminals and crime elements, and she also isn't really taking their side seriously. She makes a snarky comment about the law always being about the truth. It seems Marcy represents a more morally grey side of the law, as opposed to Matt and Foggy Bear's niceness. Maybe even reflecting the self-centered side of Foggy Nelson. But Foggy pulls a cool trick out of his bag, saying that convincing his client to agree is actually Marcy's job, and that Tully's side is afraid that the tenants of the building will get by okay in the place without having to leave per Tully's request, short of him actively forcing them out. Therefore, Marcy's firm will lose the case. I know the term mic drop is dead in your world, but it ain't dead in mine, so, well, mic drop. The scene really shows that despite Foggy's self-centered nature, that has been evident in prior episodes, and Landman and Zach are maybe more suited to indulging that side of him. He's a great lawyer, and he truly does care about people. Karen is impressed by the entire ordeal, as am I. Foggy, once again, is awesome. Even on his own, without Matt to help him, he carries himself well enough and is able to confidently dismantle Marcy's argument. A strong character. In fact, they're all strong characters. Sorry, have I mentioned that already? Moving on, we're once again shown Fisk's cufflink. It's popped up so often you'd think there'll be an entire episode dedicated to it. We find out that those two cops are definitively on Fisk's payroll, according to Wesley. Wesley ends the conversation by recommending a new drink, to which Fisk thanks him. Cardenas welcomes Foggy and Karen into her home, which is, well, to quote Foggy, a shithole. The builders won't come back to work on the place, but Foggy says they're going to do everything they can to fix her apartment personally. After which we see Matt doing his part by interrogating one of the cops. His use of the phrase, "you lie to me and I hurt you," and the fact he's brazen enough to attack a cop, even a dirty one, shows Matt on a quest for vengeance for Fisk and the Russians, especially after what happened to Claire. This cop killed the Russian, to which he replies the man in black seems to like killing Russians as well, referring to Anatoly and the corridor. Instead of arguing that he didn't, and potentially appearing weak, Matt uses this to instill fear in the detective. Claiming that now Anatoly's dead, he wants his brother. The detective says he doesn't know where Vladimir is. His heartbeat isn't increasing or decreasing, just like Karen's did in episode 1 when she lied. Matt lets him go because he's not lying. This is an interesting scene because it once again paints Matt as morally grey. In fact, a slightly darker shade of grey. He's not lying, he's not denying that he killed Anatoly, even though he very much didn't do that. But he knows that fear is an excellent motivator, and so by playing up this rumour, he's able to potentially get the detective to give him more information. On top of the pain the detective is already in. This is scary. The man in black is terrifying. His exploits are spreading. He threw that guy Semyon off the building after shoving a knife in his eye socket, and he is shown to be a capable and brutal fighter. We assume that he won't kill you because he's taken out people with guns and hasn't used any of them, even though we know he could, probably, due to his skills of precision. So you won't die, but he'll leave you in such unbearable agony and terror that you'll probably wish you were dead. The moral shades of grey are very dark in this sequence, reflected in the colour palette of the scene. Very black, dark yellow, all shrouded in shadow. Love it! He then picks up Blake's phone after hearing it vibrate, or feeling it vibrate through the air, or tasting the plastic through the air, or I don't know, he's got a lot of senses. We are then shown Vanessa, looking a little unimpressed. She's in a restaurant that is empty, except for Big Willie, sitting at a table by himself looking out at the city that he loves. He greets her, admitting he didn't know if she would actually show up, to which she says neither did she. She's been lied to before by men who were decent, but still felt the need to be dishonest, to lie about things that mattered, and she asks if Wilson feels that need. He says he doesn't like to be in public, or to be questioned, but she can ask him anything, and he will be honest. She agrees to dine with him, to which Fisk asks for the wine that Wesley recommended. Vladimir is then shown preparing Anatoly's body. Turk then enters. He expresses condolences and says he knows about the man in black. He says, according to one of his sources who works in a car shop, that an SUV came in yesterday. Black. Backseat splattered with blood and brains. They suss out that Fisk was involved somehow. Turk's information is a little bit mixed up, and they seem to put together that the man in black works for Fisk and he killed Anatoly on Fisk's behalf. We actually see this conversation happening earlier on with Leland, Madame Gao, and Nobu. So one of these men in the background here is Turk's source. Vladimir orders his men to prepare for war. All of them. He also declares 1 million for whoever can tell Vladimir where he can find Fisk. He then goes back to preparing Anatoly's body, saying they will honor him with the blood of war. Once again, Eastern Europeans are hardcore. After Foggy's plumbing escapade, Cardenas offers that they stay for dinner. Foggy and Karen seem to think it's a date now. This is the culmination of their growing relationship established in previous episodes, and they now acknowledge it to be a date after Cutman definitely wasn't. Moving on, Claire is shown with the phone that the detective was on when Matt interrogated him. She says there was a text on it. Matt asks what it says because he's blind, he can't read it, and Claire reveals that it was a text with 4 locations. One of those locations stands out to Matt as a place run by the Russians, specifically where they were holding the boy in Cutman. Claire asks where he got the phone, and Matt states he got the phone from a dirty cop on Fisk's payroll, the one who shot and killed the Russian in the precinct. Claire admits that it sounds like Matt is about to do a very dark deed. She says she can't believe him to be a man that enjoys hurting people, because if that's the case, then he wasn't the man she thought he was. Matt says he needs to do something, to be someone the city needs. And Claire argues that sounds like an excuse to do these dark deeds. Matt then snaps, asking if she wants him to stand aside and let them rip Hell's Kitchen to pieces? Let them win? What he does is important, but she can't let herself be with someone who is so close to becoming what he hates. A violent and scary man who hurts people because he can. Matt says she's right. She shouldn't. This might be why he waited so long to kiss her. He doesn't want her getting too close, as she's already pretty involved as it is. Matt won't let this stop him though, he's too focused on his crusade. The question I should ask is, for scrutiny's sake anyway, why did the cop get texted the location of the Russian mob by Fisk? It's not really shown why, and it's also not lingered on for long, so I must do some digging on my own. The phone basically exists to get Matt in position for what's to come for the Russians, but story-wise, considering all the variables, I do believe this is explained in a later episode, when Blake and Hoffman are shown taking care of the Russians who survived the explosions. Just trust me on that, okay? Have I disappointed you before? Wait, please, don't answer that. Continuing on, we see Vanessa and Fisk still in the restaurant. He admits he didn't pick the wine, which he states is him being honest. And here we have an admission of what I've been alluding to previously. Wesley is more than Fisk's assistant. They are friends, genuine friends. V reiterates that Fisk says he felt alone while looking at the painting in episode 3 and asks why he feels so. He says it's the nature of his business, rebuilding the city. After which he feels his cufflinks, something he did when she asked something similar in the previous episode. To carve something beautiful out of the wreckage. Realize what the city is truly capable of. He has a dream. She then calls attention to his cufflinks, and Fisk says they were his father's. To remember him, he wears them every day. He then asks, startlingly, what gun Vanessa has in her purse. She reveals that she basically knows what Fisk really does. He goes on to say that his dream for the city is genuine, but his resources alone are not enough to accomplish it. He's hurt people, and will hurt more, all in the goal of trying to realize his vision for the city. He says he takes no pleasure in it. The city crumbles, fades. It must be destroyed before being rebirthed. By his side is the safest place Vanessa could ever be. Her handing the gun to Fisk is literally how it appears, but it is symbolic in her lowering her defenses and giving her trust to Wilson. We then cut to Vladimir, who is interrupted from preparing Anatoly's body by Clawface. They've found Fisk. Matt, having sussed out where Vladimir is from the earlier engagements and the coordinates on the phone he took from the detective, is listening. The Russians are preparing to move on Fisk. Ooh, things are getting hotter and hotter. Continuing on from this sequence, we're back with Foggy and Karen on their date. Foggy's detailing their adventures in law school, more playful bantering, and Karen asks about Marcy. Foggy admits that Matt gets around, so maybe this influenced him getting with Marcy. And Foggy says Matt feels girls' faces in order to understand how they look, which we know is kind of true from Matt's interactions with his father a few episodes ago. Karen asks if Foggy's ever told Matt what she looks like, and Foggy starts to tell her that he doesn't need Foggy to tell him how beautiful she is. But he stops himself. It gets more intimate when Karen asks Foggy to touch her face, probably to help Foggy after he stopped himself complimenting her. He agrees to. before we cut to a blind guy tapping his cane across the ground approaching a warehouse. The guys outside say it's a delivery from Gao. After they take him in, Matt appears and fights the guy left outside. It's actually a wonder the other dude didn't immediately come back out considering the sound the guy made when he hits the door, to be honest. The guy seems to put up a bit of a fight before we're shown the inside of the building, where the Russians are gearing up for war, and Clawface asks if they're anticipating another delivery from Gao. Matt hears the click, just in time from the explosive device the blind guy has on him, and holds the dude he's fighting in front of him to shield him from the blast that comes thereafter. It's worth mentioning that Matt's still fighting the guy. The fact we see the guy put up a stronger fight than usual indicates Matt would have to take some time to fight him. Therefore, he's still outside fighting when the explosion occurs and is not burned up or killed. We cut back to Foggy and Karen. She asks Foggy what he feels before they are both knocked to the ground by an explosion outside. Cardenas is badly shaken with a head wound, and more blasts are heard. We're then shown the view of 4 explosions from inside the restaurant Fisk is in. Vanessa appears shooketh, but Fisk reassures her that the men who took the boy after beating his father will no longer infect the city, referring to the events of episodes 1 and 2. He means the Russians. The text on the phone Matt took from the cop was a list of locations Fisk planned to be bombed. Vanessa responds, "Good." She believes in Fisk's goal, but it is also clear she's no Snow White Angel herself. Matt wakes up. He hears the name Vladimir nearby. Him and Clawface survived the explosion. I'm just going to quickly comment here how good it is that the Russians actually converse with each other in Russian. They don't have to keep the Russian accent up when talking in English, as good as it is from the actors, because it would be strange for a Russian criminal enterprise to not converse in their native language. Just another element to ground the characters, I suppose. Turk is then shown in the car with Wesley. He was paid off to trick Vladimir into behaving irrationally. They had to keep Vlad emotional to make sure the plan of blowing up his forces went off effectively. Turk then asks why they planted the mask. Wesley explains that this bombing would take time to arrange, and they needed to keep Vlad focused on something else before dealing with him effectively. As we get to the final sequence, the man in black takes out Vlad's bodyguard, and he proceeds to beat Vladimir mercilessly. Not that he really needs to, the guy's in bad shape already, but probably because he wants to. He beats him in a way similar to Turk from episode 1, really letting out his anger and fury, letting the devil out, as he said. It's one thing him and Vladimir have in common, and another darker shade of grey morality. Before he can deliver a final blow, which he says is for Claire, the police come from behind and raise their weapons at him. He's surrounded, and has a long night ahead of him. No pun intended, this is where the season really starts to heat up with its story. Matt has a name, the man at the top, and he's going to do everything he can to bring Fisk down. But before that, he's got to contend with one of the foundations of Fisk's empire, that being the Russians who he started with in the first episode. Another long video, but this one was necessary because there's a lot going on in this episode character-wise. Matt and Fisk are given more or less equal screen time in episode 5, as they are now protagonist and antagonist. Every character has some level of depth given to them here, as I've stated. Matt ramps up his search in response to hearing that he's being blamed for the death of one of the Russians, delving even deeper into darkness as he does so. And as he does, he realizes how tight Fisk's fingers are clenched around the heart of Hell's Kitchen. He wants his hand gone, but he's kind of just chipping away. And in this episode, he finds a powerful component of Fisk's empire, who also happens to be the one responsible for Claire's beating, so it's a personal vendetta as well. Even Vladimir has development, appearing even more unhinged than he already was, without the more cautious nature of his brother to temper his rage. Foggy and Karen share screen time together again, ending the episode on a date. Foggy shows himself to be a strong bastion of goodness in the show. As I said in episode 1, he personally goes to Mrs. Cardenas' apartment to try and help rebuild the place, even fixing her tap. This is something Matt would never do because, well, 1, he's blind, but also because he's always busy with his vigilantism. Which is selfless, sure, but evidently he has a fire in him that makes him angry and emotional, prone to lashing out as he does on Vladimir at the end. This makes him more selfish to an extent than Foggy. Sure, Foggy's selfish as well, but his self-centered nature is more about making money, which is a fair and reasonable thing to be selfish about, but he still goes out of his way to help people like Mrs. Cardenas personally. Foggy is a better person than Matt is. Matt's personality and motivations are shown with Claire, and that he sees the world rife with, well, strife, and he wants to put it out. But Claire makes the good point that it seems like he also does it because he enjoys the violence. This is kind of inarguable at this point, but he's stubborn, so he does it anyway. Fisk is shown once again as methodical and ruthless, calculating in his endeavours with the Russians. But his softer side is also given time to shine with Vanessa before the gun comes out. His reason for his motivation is not made clear yet, but we are shown shots of what represent his motivations throughout the episodes. Again, every character, no matter their level of screen time, has great development. The fighting is still brutal but cool as hell. Matt's skills being honed and refined with every fight he gets into. The Man in Black is not a Boy Scout like Spider-Man or Superman. He's violent, angry, and will beat you to within an inch of your life if you dare cross him. In that, it's really only his motivation and who he's doing it to that separates him from the rest of the animals he contends with. The previous 4 episodes are a masterclass in setup, and now episode 5 can really begin to explode with all of it. And one small scene of clunky dialogue does not hamper that at all. Episode 5 is great in setting up our hero and villain into conflict for the next episodes to come. Episode 5 is superb in developing every character with expert dialogue, fantastic performances, and logical progression all around. Episode 5 is a masterpiece. This one took a little bit longer to get out, because it was a long one to begin with. Easily the longest script I've written for this series, and I'm guessing they're going to get longer from now on. So, well, buckle up. I'll catch you soon. Cheers.